good to be with you tonight. I've looked forward to tonight. I was telling Jeff before services started, you got an impressive group here. This is a good feeling church, and I don't read too much into that. It was great to be here last week, and Tina and I talked on the way home. In fact, I told Jeff on Thursday I had an opportunity to talk to several in Columbia about having been here. In fact, Randy Owens, a pulpit preacher, asked me how it went, and one of the elders asked me how it went, and I said, that's a neat church. They just made us feel so welcome, and I told them, I said, they wouldn't leave. They just wouldn't leave. They like each other, and in fact, I told Mike Kessler, some of you know that name, I said, Mike, I said, there's just something about smaller rural area strong churches, and I kind of miss that, and so I appreciate you all for what you do in this community and for who you are. Please call me Barry. I appreciate the respect, but when you call somebody doctor, you feel like you ought to be giving shots. And I give a lot of shots, but there's usually a Polled Hereford on the other end, so that's just way more formal than I like to be. Let me mention one more time where we're going. The last Wednesday night of January, we will discuss the topic of parenting. And as I mentioned last week, these lessons are opportunities for us to reach out into the community. There are people who will come to study the topics of marriage and family and parenting that won't come for anything else. So you'll have the opportunity to invite friends and neighbors and people that you work with or go to school with. And so I would encourage you, especially for those people that you know who have children at home who would benefit from that lesson, to go ahead and say something now to them and encourage them to go ahead and put that on their schedule. I hope that will be helpful. Well, we are talking about a WOW marriage, and look closely at this. You'll enjoy. Mike, I thought of you when I put that in tonight. If you can't tell, there's a man in the background with the rod bent over. He's got a pretty good fish, and so apparently the picture was supposed to have been of him. But let's move on. Your technology just does not like me. There we go. We've got two topics that we want to talk about tonight. The first topic is the importance of being best friends in marriage. What it's like and how important it is to be married to your best friend. And then the second topic we're going to talk about is fulfilling each other's needs. And we always want to start with what God has to say about the topic. And the first scripture we'll look at comes early in the book of Genesis, chapter 2 and verse 18. The Lord God said, "It is not good for man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable," or a helpmeet for him. And you see the comment there on the lower part of the screen. The idea from the Hebrew word from which the word helper comes suggests that Eve was very much made to take care of Adam, especially Adam's needs. And we remember the story, how that Adam was alone, and God said, "I need to make a helpmeet for him." I understand this fully. I understand this so well. My mom died in 2005. My mom and dad, if ever two became one, that was them. And many of you here in this congregation are the same way, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. Some of you would say the same thing about your parents or grandparents. And I've seen what it's like for my dad now for, 12 years, 13 years, to try to figure out how to live without my mom. And it's not been easy, and he keeps his smile and he keeps going. But oh, how he misses her. And I understand that, not like he does, but I see on a daily basis that he had the helpmeet that God made for him. And she was so special to all of us, but especially to him as his companion on a daily basis. My dad doesn't have a lot of money. He's fine. God has blessed him. He's taken care of. He's not rich by most people's standards, but I guarantee you he'd give every last penny he could to get her back. Why? Well, because that's what a blessing God gave to Adam when he gave Adam Eve. And that's what a blessing he gives to us, those of us who are married, if we take advantage of that blessing as he would have us to do. There was a study published in December of 2014 by the National Bureau of Research that found, and there's much involved in this study, but I pulled this out in particular, that the well-being effects, as they said, or as I said, the benefits of marriage are about twice as large for those whose spouse is also their best friend. About twice as large. Quite frankly, I'm surprised that number is not greater than it is. And from goodtherapy.org, what's more, there are ways to resurrect the excitement of falling in love for long-term couples who are true friends. That life gets in the way in the form of kids, mortgages, work, and in-laws should not dictate leaving the excitement behind. It can be revived by taking time regularly for just the two of you to be best friends. Now, I want to be real about this. This slide much says what I want to say in this topic, and pulling part of what I said last week as I described this situation of how life takes our close relationship from us and sends us in two different directions, and how easy it is for that to happen, where one day we wake up and we just recognize that state of coexistence that we live in. And the slide and the statement refers to things that do that to us: jobs, children, mortgages, all of these things that we talked about last week. But I love that the slide also says, but that can be undone. That can be undone. And I went so far last week as to say that I think it's, on the most part, impossible for a marriage not to at least drift in to these early stages of not being best friends, where children come and where we're so consumed with jobs and life's demands that we start feeling not nearly as closer. And I think it is at that point, or even when we find ourselves having gone deeper into that process or that coexistence state, that when we recognize it and make adjustments, we truly can do something about it and become best friends again. It is the case, as we said last week, that if marriage is based on physical attraction, it's just not going to last long. And the wow marriage always involves two people who enjoy being together. They have common interest. They don't have to work hard to enjoy each other. They have a glue that is stronger and outlast two people who are together because of how they look. Now, we know that to be true. We know in reality that situation is very true. And a very core piece of that marriage where two people just have that look when they look at each other, that they truly are best friends. It is the case that physical attraction doesn't last forever. I think batteries are getting weak maybe. Here we go. Now, Jeff and the Leonards appreciate this. I've forgotten your wife's first name, I'm sorry. But several of you appreciate this. And this is kind of how Tina and I pulled it back together. Several years ago, I went to her one day and I said, what do we do just for us? What do we do that we both look forward to, that we enjoy, that we can come home and talk about, that we can look forward to doing together? Because I was finishing school at University of Memphis and she was teaching fifth graders at Chester County, and we were trying to keep Freed Hardeman as an important part of my career and our lives, and the farm going and two kids. And we just drifted into that stage where we just didn't do much together that we both enjoyed doing. And I said, I think it's time for us to fix that. And we sat down at the kitchen table and took a legal pad, and I said, I think we need to come up with a list of things we would enjoy doing together. And I asked her, I said, what do we do? And you know what she said? She said, the only thing I can come up with is yard work. And we do kind of enjoy our yard. We enjoy our house and our farm. And truth of the matter is, she loves cutting grass. And she's typically the one, or at least she was in Henderson, that would cut the grass. I'd be out on a tractor somewhere, and she'd be in the yard cutting grass. And I told her, I said, if the only thing we can come up with that we enjoy doing together is cutting the grass, then something's wrong. And in fact, I'll tell you funny, because I talked at a seminar a few months ago about how she loved doing that, and I had an older man, a widower, who came up to me afterwards, and he said, "Preacher," he said, "your wife loved cutting the grass that much?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "When are you going to die?" Well, I knew exactly where he was going with it. I turned and walked away. So we sit down at the table, and we started making a list. And I said, "What do you think?" She said, "I don't know. What do you think?" And I said, "How about a motorcycle?" And you know what she said? She said, "You're just using this process to get a motorcycle, aren't you?" And I said, "I'm really not. I like riding bikes. Used to as a kid when I could get on one that a friend had. But we went and bought an old Honda Goldwing, a 1200, and in 6 months we rode that thing 10,000 miles. And we decided this was serious. And we sold that thing, bought an 05 1800. Some of you know what I mean by that. And we still have it. It's got 70-some thousand miles on it, and I doubt 5,000 miles of those 70-some have been ridden by just me. I really don't care that much about riding the bike just me, because that's not what it's about. You can see where we were. We were at the back of the White House. We were trying to get the picture on Pennsylvania Avenue on the front side when the Secret Service ran us off the sidewalk. And we did it real quick on the back side of the White House. I was determined that I was going to get this picture. This was a few years ago. But you know what? We can still sit and talk about that trip and how we went up the Blue Ridge Parkway and the Skyline Highway and how we went into Washington and how we rode over into Baltimore and crossing the Chesapeake Bay, how windy it was. And we can talk about this trip and this trip and this trip. And I'm not really wanting this to be about me, but I want to tell you, when we can sit there and smile with those memories, and when we can sit there and enjoy talking about our next trip and where we may go, and when we have that commonality and that interest, there's something there that wasn't there when we were allowing life to pull ourselves in so many different directions, mainly away from each other. Now, Tina and I work with a lot of couples. We do what we call 8 weeks with 8 couples, and we do that in a lot of different places, and it's a great situation. And what we hear over and over and over again, and I got to move on quickly, but just allow me to ramble for a minute longer. The thing we hear over and over again, especially from young mothers, is, "But you don't understand. We don't have time to have hobbies, or we don't have money to have hobbies." And Tina and I look at each other and grin and say, "Yes, we do. We understand what it's like both to not have time or money. We also understand what it's like to not have commonality in marriage, to not feel like you're truly best friends, to look forward to getting home every day so that you can talk about what you enjoy, so that you just respect each other enough so that it's that meaningful to be with you as though you're with your best friend," because that's exactly what it is. And what we say is, "You don't understand," because we cannot allow that to slip. We cannot allow life to take that from us, because what happens when we lose our best friend relationship is we wake up one day and we have very little interest, very little commonality, very little to talk about. And I've done this long enough and talked to enough couples that I know there are a lot of you sitting there tonight going, "Yeah, I know it, that's where we are." I'm not here to make you feel guilty. I'm here to say you can fix it. It's not going to just happen without effort, but you can fix it. You've got to be purposeful. What are some of the challenges that keep this from happening? First of all, children. I was working with a couple this afternoon, and they were talking about their youngsters, and she made the statement. She said, you know, we used to do so many things together. We used to enjoy being together. And about the time the children came, it seems like we just lost that. And I didn't tell her, but I thought, yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about tonight. Because that's what happens. They demand so much and truly are such blessings. But if we're not careful, they will demand more than we need to allow them to. Obviously, careers. And we take our relationship for granted. We just simply don't try as hard as we did when we were dating or in those early years because we feel that we've got them, we'll have them, and there's just something about that enable us to take each other for granted. Developing different hobbies and interests. I talked last week about how wives typically move toward the children in this process, toward coexistence, and how men so often turn for their fulfillment in life to hobbies and other interests. We talked last week about being on different spiritual levels and how this takes two people in different direction. And what is the one thing that does this the biggest? I'll simply say this. Life just pulling us in different directions. Pulling us in different directions. So what are some suggestions? I don't want to just identify the problem. I want to help with it. First of all, friendship and relationships take effort. Remember how hard we worked when we first started dating, when we first saw what she looked like or he looked like, when we hoped that they might be interested in us and how we would do anything. I remember going to the store with Tina, grocery shopping. I don't do that much these days. I remember doing things, going to the library and sitting with her while she studied. All I wanted to do is be with her. Why? Well, I loved her that much. I thought I did. I was so wanting to impress her and make her love me. I was willing to do anything. So that obviously stops if we're not careful. We have to keep it from stopping. Number two, how important it is to be interested in what they are interested in. You know, it's sometimes hard to be a good listener. It's sometimes hard to be interested in somebody telling us something that they are passionate about when we're not passionate about it. But you know what? If it's important to my wife, it's important to me. Not because I like it, not because it's interesting to me, but if it means that much to her, and she means that much to me, that I'm going to be interested in it for her and for what that does for us. I don't know if I'm hitting that wrong or what. Number three, take the time to find common interests. Take the time to go home tonight or this weekend and say, you know what, we need to do what he was talking about. We need to sit down and find times. And you know what, you got to tell children no. You've got to tell children this is time for mom and dad. When Carter, our firstborn, was born, we lived in Mobile, 400 miles away from either set of parents. We didn't have the automatic babysitter. We had people that loved us, would do anything for us, but you know, we were the young couple with the new child and scared of germs and all that stuff. and so it wasn't easy for us to have alone time. And I understand what that's like. I understand how hard it is to find that date night time or to find time for common interest. I understand when that young wife says, you don't understand. But once again, yes, we do. And we also understand what it's like to not make that happen. Number four, this is a matter of respect. And it's a matter of nourishing and caring for one another. Do you have a best friend outside family? Some of you do, some of you don't. For men, we don't have best friends very well. We have acquaintances, but we oftentimes don't have somebody that we can talk to about anything or somebody that we just really appreciate and they appreciate us. But do you have that person? Do you have that best friend outside of family? If so, why? What makes that relationship happen? You don't have a best friend with somebody who's selfish. You don't have a best friend relationship with somebody who disrespects you. You don't have a best friend relationship with somebody who's unwilling to sacrifice for you. and who's willing to help you if you need anything. You know, Rich Brown is outside family, I guess, at least one of my best friends in the world. If I called Rich right now and said, man, I need you. If I called him tonight and said, hey, we're having surgery tomorrow, will you come? He'd say, I'll have to make some arrangements, but if it means that much to you, I'll be there. Why? I'd do the same for him. Why? Because that's what these kinds of relationships are. And while I wouldn't say I nourish Rich, if I said that and he heard it, and he'd be mad at me. That doesn't sound like the way we talk to each other. But you know what? I truly cherish our relationship. And we've got to have that same thing in marriage, except at a greater level. Respect is a big part of this. I'm going to keep going, and I'll come back to that in different ways. Number 6, time every day, especially praying time. I'm going to keep hitting that because, as we said last week, couples who go together to God do so much better, and it's so much easier to be best friends. Number 7, purposefully praising each other every day. Telling them they're important and why, and being sincere, and finding sincere praise. And number 6, if I have a best friend, they're not going to be my best friend if I can't count on them to be honest and open with me. Best friends are going to tell you the way it is. They're not going to make excuses. They're not going to be deceitful. They're not going to lie. They're going to be open and honest. And that's obviously a major, significant part of marriage. And communication. We have to be intentional, not half-hearted. We have to focus. In summary, and I've added this to slides that I use quite often today as I was going back through this. Best friend relationships happen when two people have commonality. You're not going to be best friends with somebody that doesn't have similar interests as you do. And sometimes we have to find what those are and make them happen. And secondly, respect. We truly have to show each other respect. It is sad that oftentimes the people that we love the most are the people that we let down our guards the most with. And so oftentimes I see husbands and wives, sometimes in the counseling room, who speak to each other in ways that if somebody else spoke to their spouse the way they are or the way they do at that moment, they'd be ready to fight them over it. Why? Well, because we let down our guard. We quit purposefully being respectful. And the honesty and openness part is such a big part of it, as well as unselfishness. And finally, working to have that common interest in spiritual things. And I'm going to keep saying this, and here's why. And I taught it about last week, but I'll sum it up again by saying this. When one person is on fire for the Lord and is very faith-driven and the other person is not, the person who wants to be a child of God and make Jesus Lord, that person has spiritual life in everything they do. Everything they do in one way or another is based on faith. And for the person who doesn't have that, everything they do has that missing. It's very, very hard for two people to be best friends when they are in that way unequally yoked together. So, emphasize spirituality. Marriages that are beyond the norm don't come without effort, but they are worth it. So work on this topic. I just know there are a lot of you married people, couples tonight who are sitting there going, you know, I feel like we've lost that. I feel like we're not best friends. We just don't have that like we used to. Good news is you can get it back. Be intentional and make it happen. And one of the ways you do this is by working hard to fulfill each other's needs. Working hard to communicate and fulfill each other's needs. Now, look closely with me as we go through these. I'm going to have to speed up so I can get through on time. But I want you to think about this whole process of how we change. Tina and I'm not even going to tell you how old I am now. I've already messed that up. I'll get in trouble if I do. But I'm old enough now, and she is not old at all. But we've been around long enough that we just don't like the same things we used to. We're two different people. We enjoy things very differently from what we used to. Now, how does that come into having a successful marriage? If a successful marriage depends on finding the person who is perfect for you at that moment, what happens as we change? You think about that. If the only reason Tina is the perfect wife for me is because when we married, she took care of everything that I loved about having a 18-year-old girlfriend. Well, if that's necessary for us to have a successful marriage, then as I change and change and change, then what does she have to do? She has to change and change and change right with me. What we're talking about is me having the mindset that a successful marriage is based entirely on what she does for me, who she is for me, how well she fits me. And you see, there's a fundamental problem with that. There's a huge fundamental problem with that. Saying it a different way, does my spouse have to change exactly when and how I do? Therefore, if my philosophy for having a great marriage is to change my spouse into what I want or need him or her to be in every phase of life, then I'm probably going to be constantly disappointed and comparing her to somebody else. That's not what marriage is about. It is about me giving myself to working on me and working to have a great marriage by being for her what she needs to be. And it is the case that the success rate for this strategy is far greater. I used to hear my dad say, I remember as he preached, and I was growing up hearing him say many times, marriage is more about being the right person than finding the right person. And I remember thinking, yeah, that sounds good. But now I know, from quite frankly having a great deal more experience than he had when he would say that as a young preacher, I know he was right. It is about being the right person. Look at this. The difference between average ho-hum marriages and those where the two are happily in love and everyone can see it is the marriage where each spouse values being the special person for their spouse. You know that older couple who's been married 62 years as what, the Ezels? 62 years. You know, you look at those couples who have made it so far and done so well, and you just see them loving each other and being interested in each other and caring for each other, taking care of the little lady, looking up to the man. You know, that sweet disposition. How do they get to that point? Well, through some hard times, through learning some things, through figuring some things out, but most of all, those who have the wow marriage get there because they put each other first and take great pride in doing it. And what we're talking about truly is a matter of respect and appreciation, showing our best side. And again, what does God have to say? The golden rule, doing to others as you would have them do unto you. This is the law and the prophets and what God would have. And the passage I mentioned last week, it is more blessed to give than to receive. We sleep better at night when we spend the day doing for others than we do when we have others trying to do for us. And putting that a different way that kind of frames all of where we're going for the rest of the time we have tonight, I'll say it this way. Marriages where spouses constantly are seeking for what the other one can do for them have a marriage that's not happy and fulfilling. When two people are constantly looking to see what the other one can do for them, it's like trying to have a best friend who is constantly trying to see what they can get out of you in the relationship. We don't stay in that long, do we? And the reason a lot of marriages don't make it is this very thing. Look at Ephesians 5 again, verse 28. Look at the level of unselfishness. Look at how God tells me to give myself up for Tina. Husbands, love your wives as your own bodies, because if you do so, then you truly love yourself. In Ephesians 5:25, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself for it. You give me an illustration that demands more unselfishness than this one. Husbands, you give me an illustration that demands more unselfishness than the illustration that Paul gave us in Christ loving the church and giving himself for it, and I'll put it in my slides. I don't think you'll do it. Why? Because God says, I want you to be that unselfish as Christ was unselfish. And I want to say this. It is so often the case when I meet with couples that one of them wants it more than the other. That one of them wants it more than the other. It may very well be that some of you are here tonight because your spouse dragged you. And we tend to think in terms of gender. If that's the case, I'll say there are probably some wives here tonight who beg their husbands to come. And you're sitting there going, why is he talking about me right now? What I want to say is, if one of you wants it more than the other, wear him or her out by being the person that worships the ground that he or she walks on. Find out what his or her needs are and provide them to the best of your ability. Love them unselfishly, unconditionally, and you see if change doesn't happen. Why? Because it's hard to ignore somebody who treats you like a king or a queen every day of your life. It's hard to ignore somebody who will love you to death even when you're not very lovable. It's hard to ignore somebody who treats you good when you treat them bad, who is honest with you when you're not honest with them, who respects you when you don't respect them. A lot of times the advice I give to a spouse who says, I don't know what to do, in fact, the words I say over and over again, love him to death or love her to death. You love him or her as long as you can, and it's hard to ignore, and eventually, hopefully, they will see nobody else will love me like that and love you back in the same way, which is what these are saying. Now, this paragraph, I'll jump to this one. This paragraph says, look at what it looks like. If I love my wife in the way I just described, and if she loves me in the same way, life is good. When I have a spouse who treats me like a king every day of my life, who unselfishly will take care of me, it's pretty hard for me not to do that for them. And what this looks like is, if I give myself to taking care of Tina and what she needs, and if she gives herself for taking care of me and what I need, then we both get what we want. We both get what we want in a far greater way than we ever imagined. Now, Tina and I make a lot of mistakes. We don't do a lot of things right. And if you go back a few years, we made a lot of mistakes. But we fixed a lot of those. Today, I can honestly tell you, in every effort I can do or make to be humble, that I work harder to take care of her needs than my own. And it's more important to me to take care of hers than it is my own. And she's at West 7th tonight, but if she were here and you ask her, or if you ask me, I'll say she does the same, probably in a far greater way. And life's good. It's good. Far greater than we could imagine. Why? Because we finally figured out what God tells us to do, to put each other first, to submit ourselves one to another. And again tonight, I want to give you a tool to make this easy. Some of you will like it, some of you won't like it. It's a very personality type thing, but for those of you who don't like it, stay with me. I'm going to give you another method. It's what we call needs list. With most every couple that I or we work with, we do needs list, and here's how it works. We ask each spouse to write down the 3 to 5 things he or she most needs from the other. And after spending time writing, each discusses his or her needs. This is what I mean. This is what's important to me. Needs have to be behavioral. They have to be something you can do. Needs can't be feelings or emotions. Sometimes if there has been an inappropriate relationship in a marriage, sometimes the spouse will say, I need him to trust me, or I need her to trust me. And we can't automatically change how we feel by effort. Doesn't work that way. But we can change how we act by effort. And by the way, even with the trust thing, the right kind of behavior is amazing how it helps the emotion and the feeling to get to where it ought to be. In other words, if my spouse needs to trust me, if I'll do the right things, I'll make it much easier for her to trust me. But the way we state the need has to do with what I do, not what I feel. And after writing down, we talk about this is what I need, and the other one listens. Number 3, and I recommend after a week or after 2 weeks at the most, you sit down with each other, you pass the needs list across the table or the bed, or you hand the needs list to each other, and you grade each other. Now, it sounds like an academic exercise now, doesn't it? Now you're grading each other. Here's why it's important, and here's why it matters, and here's why it works. Tina may put on her needs list, as she often does, I need you to help me more around the house. I need you to help me with housework. And if she puts that on her needs list, I used to say, all right, specifically, what do you have in mind? Well, it would help me if you do this, 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 and this. And so after the weeks up, in fact, for years, Tina and I did this every Sunday night, and to this day, we still have a needs list. We started this way many years ago, and we've never gone without a needs list. We don't do it every Sunday night. We don't redo it. But when we grade each other on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being low and 5 being high, if I say, all right, how did I do this week in helping you around the house? And if she says, I'd give you a 3, my question is, what could I have done to have made it a 5? And she says, I appreciated when you did this and this, but I really was hoping that you would have, and this fathead might say, I didn't think about that. I didn't even see that. I didn't realize that was going on. I didn't realize that matters to you. And she says, well, it really did matter to me. Now, watch what's going on here. What's going on here is we are talking and communicating and understanding like we don't do without something to help us to do that. Because what that conversation looks like more than not is it builds up and builds up and builds up, and finally in the wrong moment, Tina might say, I'm so sick and tired of doing all the housework myself. I'm so tired of not getting any help around here. And how do I respond to that? Honey, let me give you a hug. I have so messed up. I want to do better. No, that's not the way that works. She says, I'm so sick and tired of not getting help. And I go, well, do you not remember when I... Because if I can find one exception to the rule, then I've got something to hang on and to shoot her down and to win my case. But when we're doing needs lists, that doesn't happen. When we do needs lists, we're both doing it because we both want to take care of each other's needs. We both want to help each other, and it just simply is an opportunity for us to put on paper a focal point of the 3 to 5 things that right now would be really important to her and would help her. Now, Tina does put on her needs list most of the time housework. I grew up in a family where my mom did it and my dad was outside taking care of all the other things, as so many of our past generations were. Tina grew up in a house where her dad cooked a lot and washed dishes and, ooh. But you know what? You know what I put on my needs list? And I'll show you a list of suggestions in a minute, but one of the things I always put on my needs list is help around the farm. You know what that means for Tina? It means she helps me run barbed wire. It means she gets on the Ford and rakes hay for me when I'm baling. It means when I'm working calves, she holds the tail up so I can cut the bull calves. You know where she grew up? In Memphis. You know how far and hard she would have run when she was 18? Had anybody told her she'd be married to a farmer and she'd get used to having cow manure on her feet? She would have run pretty hard. She doesn't like doing any of that. She doesn't enjoy it. If the weather's right and the situation's right, fencing is something even Micah and I can enjoy. Tina will never enjoy that. But if I get home tonight and the bull has gone through a fence and I say, honey, fence is down, she's not even going to ask me if I need her to help. She's going to put on her coat and we're going to go fix it. Why? Because she'll do that for me. And if she'll do that for me, and I'm sitting in watching the news or ESPN and she's in there washing dishes, it's pretty hard on me to just sit there and not at least pick up a towel and go and dry. Why? Because this process has caused us to focus. And when I've got somebody who's being that sacrificial for me, it truly is hard for me not to be sacrificial for them. Redo the needs list. Needs change. And I encourage couples, especially when they're trying to rebuild or trying to strengthen, to do this on a weekly basis. You can do it in 10 or 15 minutes. And needs change, so redo them. What are the challenges? Assuming that I understand what she needs and how to fulfill them. Sometimes it's a challenge knowing what my own needs are. I mentioned this last week, but the thing that is so difficult is to ask a young mother to write down the 3 to 5 things that she needs the most from him. Because what she says is, over and over again, I have no idea. Why? She has given herself so to taking care of everybody else, she's lost herself in the process. But here's the problem with that. The problem with that is, if I ask you as a young wife and mother what you need from him, and you go, I don't know, then my next statement is, well, how in the wide world of sports is he supposed to figure it out? And it's important for you to figure that out so he can know how to take care of your needs. So many times people are just unwilling to stop and talk and to pour themselves out in this way. Sometimes we assume if it's my need, then it should be her need, or if I like it, she should too. Sometimes it's being too manly or insensitive. I've got a good friend who came to a seminar I did one time, and I was talking about the needs list, and he came up to me afterwards and he said, you got to be kidding if you think I'm going to do a needs list. And I didn't say much because it was not the time or the place. I kind of tried to jokingly make him feel bad about it. But the truth of the matter is, Tina and I had commented for years about how the two of them just seemed to coexist. And I wanted to shake him and go, yeah, no wonder. No wonder. Why don't you quit being so manly and insensitive, thinking that each other should not have that need, taking the time to do it, sometimes having been married long enough that we're not inclined to change. Now, if I were to poll you next week and say how many of you went home and did your needs list between now and next week, how many of you would come back and say you did? Well, I expect that number would be a little less than 100%. Now, if you were one of the ones who said, I just don't want to do that, that's not me, I'm just not geared that way, and I understand, it's personality type. Some of us are goal-oriented and assessment-driven, and some of us are not. If we're kind of heading the right direction, generally speaking, we're good. Well, for those of you who are here, here's what I want to say. Think of it as a wish list. Ask your spouse, is there anything in the world that I could do for you that would make you happy, that would make life better? If so, what would it be? And if you're not inclined tonight or this week to go home and work on a needs list with your spouse, ask that question. Now, I'm out of time, but I want to read the last paragraph of this. I asked a few months ago a couple who had worked really hard on repairing a marriage to do so. And they worked so hard on needs lists, and they continue to do it. And let me read the last 2 paragraphs. Be patient with me. I'll do it as quickly as I can. She talked in the first 2 about how they were church-going people, how they read 5 languages, love languages books, how they went to seminars, how they thought they were doing all the right things, but their marriage was falling apart, and truly it was. When they first came to me, they were, as she says in this, on their last leg. She says, we were emotionally broken. We were fighting hard not to lose. Fast forward sometime, a counseling session or two, we learned about the needs list. It makes communicating, being open-hearted, giving real love in action, and creating an atmosphere of honor and love where empty bitterness once lived. We learned how to make a needs list and then follow through. At first, it seemed like we were two young school kids trying to finish up our assignment before the teacher's deadline. I understand. Because our counselor met with us weekly, we knew he would ask our spouse the hard question of how did I measure up the previous week. So we did things out of duty the first few weeks. Things were awkward, uncomfortable, and sometimes hard, and they took effort. But we didn't give up. And honor and love came to our marriage. There were times when love only flowed one direction. Maybe only one of us was really trying. Then it showed us the real meaning of love. Giving when you're getting nothing in return. That kind of love is powerful. That kind of love is life-changing. It broke down the walls of bitterness, unforgiveness, anger, pride, and selfishness that had created such division. We were able to heal slowly over time. Needs list became the medicine, the smile, the sweetness. It became a habit, and doing things for his needs list became second nature, and vice versa. We still sit and review and rewrite them every week, only missing rarely. And it's evident even now when we don't carve out the time for it. It took sacrifice, effort, and commitment, but we can tell you on the other side of devastated and hopeless, the needs list is one of the most powerful tools you can use to change your marriage, and God used it by his grace and goodness to help us make it through. What is it? It's just a tool that helps us to be unselfish and unconditional in loving each other. And when two people do it, it truly is great. Examples of her needs: if you're having trouble coming up with them, spiritual encouragement needs to be on every needs list. Time to talk about the day and things in general. Help with housework and kitchen. Back rubs. It's amazing how often this lands on her needs list. Verbalized appreciation and praise. Help with the children. Just tell me that you love me. Pay attention to me when I talk to you. Realize that what I say is important. Ask me out without the children. Alone time. Can't tell you how many times I've heard young mothers say, oh, if I could just have 5 minutes to go to the bathroom by myself. So many of you understand that. She often wants non-sexual affection. Examples of his needs: spiritual encouragement. I need you to help me stay close to God. Physical or sexual needs: praise and appreciation, being interested in what I'm interested in. Sometimes alone time for hobbies, special meals. Now, before I give you the watered-down version, I've got to tell you this story. I was doing this in West Tennessee several years ago, and on Sunday morning I talked about the needs list, and on Sunday night a 90-something-year-old man came to me and he said, "Preacher, I got to tell you something." I said, "All right, what is it?" And he said, "That needs list thing works." And I said, "Really?" I said, "Why?" And he said, "Worked for me this afternoon." And I thought, where is this going? He said, "You know what I got?" And I said, "No, what?" He said, "A pie." I said, "Good for her. Good for her." What's the watered-down version? Micah, you had a real funny look on your face when I first started telling that. If you're not willing to do the needs list, simply ask each other, what do I need to work on that's important to you? Or what could I do that would make you go, wow, that was really nice? Now, what we've talked about tonight is not easy. I told you last week you're not going to become a marathon runner by just wishing it, and you're not going to have a wow marriage by coming and hearing me talk about these things if you don't take them and do them. Will you work on them? Tonight we offer the invitation. What's the invitation? We've talked about so many godly principles tonight, and what a huge principle it is for us to submit ourselves in relationships, but especially in our relationship to God. And when we do, things just fall in place so much better. Tonight, we offer the invitation. If you need to come, putting on Christ in baptism, repenting of your sins, confessing him to be Son of God, or if you need to come asking for the prayers of this church, possibly to help your marriage to be stronger, this church would love to do that. If you need to come, will you do so while we stand and sing?